Trumptopia. Or good afternoon if you're being nitpicky. It's 1:23 p.m. Pacific Time, 7/3/2017. I'm your host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Let's get this show started. Thanks for tuning in. This show is broadcast live on the Sprecher Squeaky Chair Studio platform. No, just Sprecher.com. If you're interested in tuning in live because you've caught this show on Facebook or YouTube or something, Sprecher.com. There's also a podcast, Sprecher app. I think it's kind of confusing. They have like more than 3 apps, I think, and I get confused. I just use the recording platform, and I don't have an account in the other. At any rate, here we are. Breaking news: Chrissy doesn't give a fuck. Closes all the beaches. He has a technicality. Before anyone jumps down my throat, I don't like Chris Christie, but I think I dislike him as a political figure, not as a human being. As a human being, I love him, right? All human beings love and respect. Period. That's my religion. But I don't like his attitude in his politics, and I don't like his attitude in his attitude. I don't like the cut of his jib, and it's got nothing to do with his body image or body size. And a lot of New Jerseyans apparently agree. I have to just go ahead and just jump this in live. It was MSNBC showing a graphic of the new McQuimbiac poll, or Pisimbiac, however you pronounce that. Here, I can rewind. I have the news on the TV, but the volume is off. I guess because, in part, I'm addicted to watching the news. I guess I should just step up and say, hello? Hold on. The Quinnipiac poll, Quinnipiac University. Governor Christie's approval rating, approval 15%, disapproval 81%. I think the variable was 7 percentage points. That was just on the TV box. I'm sure I'm going to get some grief from it at some point from people telling me how, the news is all owned by the 6 same, ultra-rich megalomaniacs. I know that. I've known that since, 1987. I'm not bullshitting. I was alive at the time and paying attention to stuff. And I know that even, blah, 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 blah. All that whole jibber jam. The title of today's show, to try to sound like I pretend that I'm organized, is this wrong pile of things. The title of today's show is the Twitterer-in-Chief. Twitterer, as in, I conjugated Twitter into the action verb. He is a Twitterer-in-Chief. He is the president of the United States. A different news agency, and don't get mad at me if the numbers are wrong. I kind of think it's right because they were quoting a statistical analysis conducted by a nonpartisan internet statistics organization. But in terms of being on point, as the kids like to say these days, or on message, as the professionals would use the term of art in politics, they rated a percentage of how on message Donald Trump's tweets were over the last month, on a week by week. Because I don't know if you've noticed, my fellow Trumptopians, but Trumptopia now has a week to week theme, and has had for I guess a month and a half or so. At first, I thought it was just this 1 week that was like Shark Week, not the ladies, not the weird and sort of irrational, pejorative sounding. Code word for the ladies' time of the month, but Shark Week on Nature, Discovery Channel, whichever one that is, one of them cable channels with the animals and the no news. I thought it was that, and I think the very first one I noticed was Infrastructure Week, which I giggled at really hard, really, really hard. I almost broke out into hardcore real life LOLing. because like he tips the hat to infrastructure and the problems of the current conditions of American infrastructure, but being Trump, you can't help but pull a Trump and talk about it, tip the hat, and then really never do much about it at all until some, already in the works sort of thing comes up that he can slap his name on. I know there's a lot of Trump fans that are convinced that he's working really hard, but he has been golfing harder than Obama ever did. He's been away from the White House more often than Obama or any other Democratic. I don't know about Republican statistics, but than any other Democrat has ever been away from office, from the White House. And he's got this tweeting addiction. And I don't use the term lightly. I am a person who understands the struggles and the difficulties and the personal side of addiction. I struggle with my addiction to cigarettes, which isn't very taboo. We kind of are all still chill, although we've, smokers' rights have been eradicated. No one is rallying, protest marches to the call of protect our smokers' rights. Even smokers aren't like, we bitch and moan about it, but we also don't do anything about it because we know we shouldn't be smoking, I think. And correct me if I'm wrong, fellow cigarette smokers, consumers of the highly processed tobacco plant, which arguably in its most organic and natural form, consumed in its more traditional, holistic, medicinal sense, the way our brothers and sisters who were here before this place was called America, that might not be so horrible. And if we had that in our culture, that might be kind of cool. But that is not at all how we smoke cigarettes. We smoke cigarettes as an addiction. And I've struggled with that for like 11 years. Thank God I didn't start smoking when I was 5. Thank God there wasn't the internet the way it exists now, that there wasn't internet on your phone vis-a-vis crazy apps when I was that young, because I might be even deeper in an internet usage addiction. But I mean it seriously. And I don't mean it pejoratively. I don't mean it as a insult the way many people use the term addicts. But I think that he has an addiction. Obviously, all addictions have a couple of things in common. Maybe it's not obvious. It seems obvious to me, but I'm a person who now sort of pins a lot of tails on this donkey. Forgive the crude analogy, but ego, right? I doubt anyone's going to rush into the defense of Donald Trump and say that man is free of ego. And addiction is at the core of... ego, rather. Forgive me. Ego is at the core of addiction. Not because. That statement is true. One can verify its veracity because... it is undeniable. It's sort of undebunkable. The core trait or aspect or function, one might say, of ego is to want more of anything and something, whatever it is. We developed it as a survival thing. We want more safety, and so we want that. And our ego's there to make sure that we, even if we feel unworthy of it for other reasons, and other areas of our emotional life, we might feel unworthy. But ego will sneak right in there, and under the guise of feeling unworthy, rationalize some reason why we deserve to have more. Insert whatever you want. More fun, more sex, more cigarettes, more alcohol, more outrage or enthusiasm from my audience vis-a-vis the crazy shit I post on Twitter. My dear fellow Trumptopians, I think that in our postmodern era, the best response to Trump, and in terms of Twitter and the way he uses it, is to disavow it and just block it out. I don't know I should have looked this up before hitting record or hitting transmit, hitting the big red button. But I recall hearing, and I've had the thought then that I should follow up and do some numbers. I'm sure someone's done a real hard, computer analysis of this. But with different software, they can look at your account and determine. Why did I say different software? With specific software whose names I do not know, people with that kind of agencies with that kind of research, that kind of tool can assess an account that has millions of followers, whether it's Twitter or Instagram or what have you. They can look at the subsequent followers and those accounts and the characteristics of let us call it the online behaviors of those accounts, and determine if the probability. I'm assuming it's probabilistic. The probability of any given individual account being fake or being a real person, and then determine the statistical probability of the numbers. Like out of 1 million followers, 2/3 of them are all bots peddling porn. You really have 525,000 followers, or whatever the real numbers would be there, because I just was pulling placeholder numbers for the sake of making my point. So somebody was talking about that. I have no idea at this moment in time what platform. I think it was the radio, which I don't listen too often because I have to be in my car to listen to the radio, because sort of by default I don't own an actual radio that sits in my house. That just doesn't happen anymore. You have the internet, right? At any rate, someone was saying that although, because Trump likes to tout that he's bypassing the media vis-a-vis social media, and saying that this is his free speech, and I sort of defend that. I don't think that he should be sanctioned verbally. No one should. Our response shouldn't be to try to verbally discipline him. And any amount of hoping for some effort by someone close to him to get him to curb or his habit or be more specific or at least less Trump-like, all meaningless. The guy does have free will. It's sort of the bitch of the situation in general is that whatever else you might opine, and by that I mean whatever your opinion might be about all the other things at play here, politics, the law, morality, Donald Trump is still just another human being like you and I, and he is still bound here, apparently, within the matrix of illusion for now, and he has free will, which transcends the right of free speech in a horribly frightening way, because that means we the only way we can stop him is to heal his whatever about his ego that will resolve his addiction problem about compulsively saying whatever he thinks is the right thing to say at the moment, and about being on their off message. If you really want to make him a better president, that would be the only cure there, I think, is to go in with a therapist and heal him as a human being of his ego problem and approach it like an addiction intervention. So if anybody from the White House, if anybody in the deep state and or the White House are listening, which I highly doubt, but just in case anybody is, knock on wood, you float that up the chain of command, yo. Get him in there with a nice whatever his everyone has an entree to therapy, no matter how grandiose their ego and their self-image might be. Trump believes a lot about himself. Whether those things that he believes about himself are all true, a clear-sighted person would easily agree that the odds of what his self-beliefs are being true are equal to the percentage of the bullshit that comes out of his mouth that is not true. I think. Anyways, and honestly, it is my amateur, semi-professional opinion that all stems from emotional, psychological, and spiritual. Dare I even use the term genetic? Not in a, again, I'm never trying to use things in that kind of knee-jerk derogatory way. It's just that increasingly it's being posited or theorized that it's potentially true that our genes carry forth from our parents and our predecessors more than just physical traits. That they might actually carry data, and that data might, therefore, in some form or another that we haven't fully grasped yet, bring forth emotional information, or, I think it should seem pretty obvious if you just sort of accept that genomics is at the very realistic level, the way it actually functions has a lot to do with transferring information from a previous, vessel to the next vessel that's going to maintain that information, diversify it up a bit, and then share it and pass it on, right? So any information could be coded in that information if it's just information, including trauma. And if you follow me down this spiritual rabbit hole, which is, of course, my entire purpose, right? Because when you go down a rabbit hole, you're not really going down, you're going up. Vis-a-vis the, ego rabbit holes go down, vicious spiral. Spiritual rabbit holes go up, the virtuous spiral. Whole nother episode, but follow me for a minute. If there's a spiritual malady, and that's what's afflicting him, then, the only real solution is to spiritually cure him. Acknowledging the pragmatic limitations of how difficult it would be for anyone outside of his immediate sphere of trust to posit the idea or advance the idea to him, pitch him the idea that he needs spiritual healing, there's a second option. And that's, of course, for the nation to conduct its own, to step up to its own spiritual healing. Which brings us, to an ancient spiritual truth. I think it's often attributed to both Rumi and the Buddha, and I'm sure it's because it's one of those concepts, one of those true truths. Is this true? Is it true? Is it true? That harkens back to an era that's long forgotten, when the wealth of our deepest and most powerful spiritual wisdom was at the center of our society. But I digress from that whole thing. That's a whole other topic for a whole other episode, which I'm sure I've touched on before. And this other true is that if we as a nation, it almost doesn't matter from which faith, right? That's why we can acknowledge and all kind of meet in the middle, if we sort of give spiritual power to the notion of coexisting. And I love that bumper sticker for having that powerful of a message behind it, the coexist bumper sticker, where each letter of the word coexist is a different spiritual symbol for a different organization or variety of religion. But let's not go down on let's reserve that talk for an episode of Zencast. Twitter and his tweets, man. First of all, I'm cynical enough to think that he has an addiction, but he also has an agenda with him, and his agenda is not on the surface. So that's something that I think. Oh, I wanted to quote somebody because I think this particular is a Facebook friend that I don't know in person. He might be a celebrity. I'm not sure. He might not be. He might just be some dude with some like-mindedness going on. Oh, I totally had this at the top, and then my app said, "Oh, you went to sleep? You don't want to look at that anymore?" I don't like that it does that. There's a bunch of things that I would do differently in a bunch of apps if I had the access that I think the world would love. So I'm only saying that it's by pure random magic, at some point, app developers with some clout come through my podcast and go, I wonder what that guy means. I better hit him up. I will gladly take that job. Anyways, so earlier I just opened up my phone app for the Facebook. No commercial endorsement intended there. And this fella, Jesse James, that goes by Jesse James, don't know if that's his real name. I don't know how people still to this day managed to successfully have what clearly read as like not genuine birth certificate names. Not that I have a problem with that. I'm not judging. I wish, in hindsight, that from the very beginning I had entered the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo as my name on Facebook a long time ago. It's my brand. I have a real name as an author does, but if I publish books, I would publish them under a nom de plume. It's part of the mystique, because as a creator, I am simultaneously being very genuine, but I'm also sort of playing a character. Nothing new, been done before. I think of Colbert. I guess I was in large part, if not inspired, sort of like it confirmed my intuitive notion of what I wanted to generate when I first came across Colbert. Blah, 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 backstory bullshit. Don't need to talk about that. So this gentleman, Jesse James, I wish I was still live on the Facebook app instead of on a screenshot. I took a screenshot because I knew I wouldn't be able to find it again right away. His post reads, I wanted to quote it to get it right, because I often butcher people's statements even though I try to get the basic point across. This is from moments ago, and I quote, everybody's getting all excited about this rap battle. Commentary insertion. I think that's a beautiful way to characterize what Donald Trump is doing. He's a performance artist. Has always been that. Some people use the word a scam artist. Some people have I was really proud. I'll come back to this in a second. I got to come back to the Jesse James quote. But I want to perpetually give kudos to the gentleman. I have his name on a piece of paper somewhere. Here he is, Frank Chiefe, who on a show a few days ago called outright Trump and company and all of his ilk grifters. Anyways, performance artist, to be polite and genteel about it. So everybody's getting all excited about this rap battle between Trump and CNN. Like it's not some reality TV show for the masses. Agreed, Mr. Jesse James. Of course it is. Politics is the original reality television show. I know, we had politics before television, but the analogy persists. I resume with the quotation. In quotes, if CNN really does go down, they're just sacrificing it to give you more confidence in Fox, CBS, NBC, TWC, and any other news outlets that are all owned by the same 6 people. Posted on this day, just now, apparently at around 1:20 p.m., by the very astute and observant Jesse James, fellow friend of mine on Facebook. I usually like to keep people's anonymity, but I overtly asked him if I could quote him, and he said, anytime. Sounds like the guy doesn't mind a little bit of public attention thrown his way. If he's a celebrity, extra deluxe, super awesome, because I hope that gleans me some listeners. I'm going to follow up and let him know and post a link. But so much to unpack there from that quote. So much clear-sightedness, without like falling into the pit trap of being cynical. There's a value to cynicism, if I may interject a cynicism sidebar. There's a value to cynicism, but it sort of taps out. You can only go so far being cynical. And then ultimately you're sort of just as bad as anybody else. It's part of the problem. Because cynicism can trigger an ego trap, a rabbit hole trip down to hate. Just fucking hate. Being haters. And ask any hater, how cynical are you? How cynical have you been? So, having said all that, and having totally agreed, I think it's quite fascinating that so much hay is being made. Always, the question to remember and to ask ourselves as individuals, to ask each other, and others who give a shit about the news, or who give a shit about, or who are addicted to the news. By the way, I respect and admire the Kill Your Television movement. I'm a longtime supporter, which will bring us full circle to my whole thing. Like, let's just tune President Trump's Twitter account out. Let's stop responding, and let's bring the pressure to the news to say, if Trump wants a workaround from the media to speak directly to his followers, let's let him have it. Let's stop Let's stop giving news time, airtime, print space to his Twitter account. Full stop. Why? How? Why? Because A, it's an addiction. A, he's got an agenda behind it. And it's not, it's like I said before, it's not on the surface. Always, to get back to this question I didn't finish asking, the question to ask in times like these, whether it's Trump or whether it's a Democrat or a Republican or a third party, God bless it if we ever get one. Again, we've had a third party president, right? We've had independent presidents before, I do believe. Could be wrong there. But the question is, what are they distracting us from? Because, the point is true. While there are still some, quote-unquote publicly owned media outlets, they probably have a little bit. They fight the influence as much as possible, but they probably get some influence from big corporate, interests. Maybe those interests are also disguised or pretending to be anti-corporate, you know what I'm saying? But let us say, trying to be as fair as possible, but also, and trying not to be cynical, let's say 75%. I've rounded down from what is likely to be true, just to give some fair game balance, per se. Just whatever. Let's say 75% of known media is indeed, ultimately, following the money up the chain of corporate shells and whatnot, and tiers of ownership, are owned by the same 6 or 7 or 11 people. And if it's really just 6 people, I'm being generous, right? Let's say it's a little bit more. Let's say it's 15 people. Whatever. What are the odds that they don't all know each other? Right? What are the odds that they don't somehow want to utilize their assets, the companies that they own, in service of some agenda, even if it's benign, even if it's innocent? I doubt it is. We are talking about the same group of people that are also the 1%, right? We're all in concurrence that they are those that truly run things. So we have this nuisance, and it's being used against the general good by serving as a distraction. It stokes the passion and the fire and the ego of the hardcore supporters. No need to pejoratively characterize those supporters. God bless it. They're all human beings, but they are definitely having their egos stoked. We are special, we are better, we're number one, Trump's our guy, and that gives us entitlement feelings of belonging and supremacy and betterness over others. Right? And that explains the radical behavior. Because when you empower radicals, they act more radically. But let's not forget that radicalism might be something that's on the 1%'s agenda. I'm always concerned when well-intentioned friends, spiritual or otherwise, are caught up with this nonsense about fighting radicalism. We're not fighting radicalism. And that's what the whole neuro-linguistic programming battle about, calling it radical Islamic terrorism, was all about. By giving us a white hat, black hat argument, it didn't matter which side of the divide you were, whether you respected Islam as an organized religion and understood that only X percentage of individuals waving that flag were terrorists, and that some percentage of them could possibly even be fake terrorists, double agents of society, black flag operations, all that kind of nonsense, might be true. And that you respected the non-use of the term. You still got the other term shoved down your throat, and you still got inculcated. And so the false notion, follow me on this thinking here, follow me on this crazy, call me crazy if you want, but think it through with me first. If they indoctrinate us with this notion that, whether we agree with it or not, it's now in our brains, radical Islamic jihadist terrorism, and that we are fighting radicalism, and yet we ignore non-jihadist Islamic individuals who are, we don't ignore, but we downplay and try to normalize, try to rationalize in non-radical terms, then we are really setting ourselves up for nonsense, for some cluster fuckery of violence, man. Because what radicalization, and I hate using the word because it's a fucking trigger word, right? It pisses people off. It may or may not trigger red flag warnings on the NSA Snoop robots. Radicalization, and I'll stop using the word, is not owned by any one group, yo. I'm going to switch to hate. Hate is not owned by any one group or label or classification of people. Anybody that's a human being can hate. Anybody that's a human being can fall into the ego trap of being seduced down the path of hate until their hate becomes extreme. Thus, it's important not to hyper-focus our distress, our anxiety, and our attempt to solve the problem at any one group or another, because it's a human problem. Just like addiction doesn't belong to any one class of people. Addicts are not separate from the human being. Addicts are not Americans, are not Americans, you know what I mean? They are fellow human beings. They are fellow Americans. They are fellow Californians, Coloradians, whatever state you live in. What do you guys call yourselves over in Connecticut, by the way? Can anyone answer that without falling over giggling? Because I can't. I can't try to find a word that sounds like I live in Connecticut. That doesn't sound naughty. At any rate, I digress. So that's the important part, right? So the same is true of the oppressors. And this is where it's important, and why I do this show, because there's so much hate flowing out of otherwise well-intentioned people. Atheists, spiritual, religious, doesn't matter. They're fed up, right? People are getting increasingly fed up. And the trend is that as more and more people pay attention to bits and pieces of the craziness that's going on in our world, not all of it has to do with Trump. It's just what we're living with here in Trumptopia. As more and more people get fed up, and more people wake up from one of the layers of non-wakefulness that they may be wrapped in. Because mind you, waking up is not an on-off thing. It is a process. It is a lifelong process. You and I and everybody else on this planet will die, and we'll have not fully awakened yet. So let's not be assholes with that label. I always have to bring that up because I see a lot of hate being spewed by folks who in other moments will pat themselves on the back for being awake. Said it before, say it again. I've posted it before and I'll post it again. I am not awake. You are not awake. But together, we can engage or get on the path of awakening. Together we are awakening. Because that is what the universe is about. So, ego and pride. Ego is not our amigo, as, oh, darn it. I can never remember his name when I think of that quote. Crazy dude with the wild hair. Did a lot of drugs. Not that that's a drug endorsement, but he was a self-proclaimed scientist of psychedelics. And there was much merit in that because he did it intelligently and with parameters for safety and whatnot, all that. But Twitter and the Twitter-in-chief, like, none of this would... Let's walk through it. I got 10 minutes left, right? Before I gotta take a break. I loathe to do this, but I do this often, and then I end up sometimes not even referring to it. But I'll pull up on my laptop, which is falling apart and dying. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Donations are welcome, although not required. I pull up Donald J. Trump's @RealDonaldTrump Twitter account. I don't log in, and I haven't followed him. While generally I don't have a problem following politicians of whatever ideological spectrum, because, you know, if I've got anything to say is like ideology's huge stoppage to us solving the problem, folks. So I'm not anti-ideology, because that itself becomes an ideology, I believe. I'm just non-ideological. I try to non-participate in inculcating myself or indoctrinating myself with ideology. But Trump is so challenging as a human being that I just don't want to give either of his accounts any boon. But my thought experiment, last 10 minutes. How many people on his account are fake? How many accounts are spam bots for porn? Who knows, right? But when an account starts picking up momentum and people start adding it, I know this from Instagram because I've run an Instagram account that's really narrowly focused. It's just memes. I curate a collection of memes that I find inspiring, that other people have created or shared, and then memes that I'm inspired to create that I hope are inspiring to other people. And that's it. I very rarely share my personal image, not out of fear, but it's just not what the account's about, etc. Right? It's just, and they're generally political, spiritual, cultural. It's basically this show in pictures and words, and in memes. And at first, it was just friends of my friends and random strangers that found an image through a hashtag search and thought, oh, okay, cool, this guy's neat. Or this account is cool or up my alley. But once I hit some threshold of more than a few hundred followers, boom, suddenly it was accounts promoting mail order brides from various nations, a lot of them former Soviet bloc nations, and just sort of porn spam, and or hookup safety spam, which is a very particularly weird kind of spam, which is spam for fake sites that pretend to claim that they're going to protect your safety somehow if you sign up and give them all your information, and then when you find a match on Tinder or OkCupid or whatever, or on Instagram or whatever, someone that you like, and you ask them to sign up to this website to verify that they're really who they are. And then they charge the guys money but not the girls apparently, and then you can chat on that site and it's really them. While I understand and I do believe that some people require that sort of safety protection because there's crazy people on the internet, right? I don't think I'm one of them, but I also think it's kind of obnoxious spam because it really targets hookup culture people who want to just fuck, which, while free will, man, I don't make a moral stand against it. I don't feel morally comfortable for myself being that kind of person full time all the time, and magic happens sometimes and whatever, but the kind of person that's like actively seeking to fuck in the next 10 minutes and doesn't give a shit who that other person is, that's a way of living that's pretty extreme. I am not judging, folks. I'm trying to make a point, and coming around also trying to make multiple points. America is a place of extremes, okay? And part of Trump's agenda is to stoke a particular flavor of extreme thinking. And part of what gives him power is that his Twitter account appears to be massively popular. And he does have a lot of followers. I bet a bunch of them are bots. According to somebody, I don't think I ever finished telling this story, according to somebody on the radio, half of them. Half! And that's why I pulled up his account. I wanted to see how many followers he had. And I started sort of previewing his recent tweets, and I was like, oh, God. He's got 33.2 million. So if that's true, I don't know if it is. I don't know how to verify it myself, so I'm not claiming that it is. I'm just passing on the fact that someone on the news, on a slightly potentially more trustworthy news outlet, because I'm pretty sure it was the car radio on my way to an appointment, and so that had to mean it was listening to NPR. And he said that someone had verified some somewhat trustworthy sounding agency that does this kind of thing, that checks your accounts. Half of his followers are fake. Okay, if half of his followers are fake, how many out of the remainder are people who don't like him but want to stay right the fuck on top and don't want to have to always type in his name and whatnot, search him up, right? How many of them are followers that are new, that are sort of like in love with him because of because of the campaign, but don't know him very well and don't really look. You know what I mean? There's a lot of little old ladies with Twitter accounts. How many of them signed up? Little old, and not even old. There's a lot of young people with Twitter accounts that, may or may not spend 100 hours a week on Twitter reading everything, and that already don't trust the media or already don't watch the news. My point is, if we can cut those numbers by, let's argue. Oh, and I just missed the 4-minute and 20 mark. I keep doing that. I'm trying to make that a thing in each 45-minute segment, regardless of which series it is. I want to acknowledge that I got 4 minutes and 20 seconds just because I think it's cute. Which is not a blanket endorsement for smoking pot any which way, any old time you want, folks. Tune into Cannabis Talk. I'm kind of a prude by some stoners' measure because I think that, like, it isn't like alcohol, but like alcohol, there should be boundaries. Totally random. Sorry. Self-promotion. Had to do it since I stumbled into a 420 comment. But, let's say half. Let's just give that number credit. Let's say half of his Twitter account followers are fake. So at least a third of them are easily wishy-washy, easily flop followers. Like followers that don't really engage with Twitter much or don't really know him very well, whatever. You know what I mean? They just sort of added him to be like, yay, I want him to be the president. And another certain number have got to be people that are just now coming around to like having that aha, oh fuck moment of realizing this guy is not who he claims to be. And that his behavior spells out a much clearer picture of what he really is. He may not drink, he may not smoke, but he's an ego addict of words and of opinion and of brute force in his interactions with other human beings, etc., etc. And it would be quite the powerful movement. Like, if he is such a social media junkie, let's take it to him. Let's. If you've got an account, if you've got a Twitter account, and you followed him for whatever your reasons, and you're here listening to my words, and you're on the fence or don't like him, but followed him out of the shits and giggles curiosity because you don't give a fuck about his numbers or his popularity, take it away. Let's give it a try. And then if you already don't follow him, I don't know if this works or not, but we could also try flooding him. I'm going to have to come back because I have more thoughts on like how we can, as a resistance movement, take it to him on social media directly. And also as a movement for the media to sort of respond to his abusive behavior at them on Twitter. Let's stop covering it. Stop covering it, folks. I just don't give a fuck what he says. What it says, just stop talking about it. Only talk about what he says on camera. Only talk about what he says in written statements. If he won't stop tweeting, that's fine. Let him tweet. See if his numbers dwindle. I gotta go for now. This has been another episode of Good Morning Trumptopia. I might come back with a second part. Please do check out my other shows or series. We just try to lump in the different themes and try to keep them all together. I'm hungry for audience, folks. This show is supposed to be more like a call-in talk show, and I am working on getting a call-in line. Don't have a number to release yet. It's funny. I'm close though. Long story, but I'm taking emails. So far, my emails account's pretty empty. The incorrigible Mr. Zeppo at gmail.com is on my profile. Links and stuff. Thanks for listening. May peace, love, and grooviness be with you.